Hello and welcome back to Talking Planning. So this week's a little bit different to what I'd be normally bringing out in terms of videos. So as you'll probably notice, there's no table in front, there's no scripts, there's no prompts and pointers or anything else like that. It's much more of just an honest conversation about something that I'm passionate about and something that's taken a massive hit over the last few weeks and couple of months with coronavirus lockdowns, and that is public transport. Now, I'll be honest, I've been pretty lost without using public transport on a regular basis. So my last journey by public transport, which was a ferry to my job on Carragara Island, was on the 19th of March. So it's been very nearly 2 months since I last caught public transport. That was up until Monday. So for the first time in, 7 weeks, I actually went and caught a bus, train and ferry at some point in the day. So what I'm going to do today is just talk a little bit about whether I think public transport is safe to use at the moment, what precautions I took to make sure that I could use it safely, and what precautions have been taken to make sure that people can and do use public transport safely. And this is something I'm really passionate about because I'm very concerned that as part of this process, we will see either two things happen. One, we'll see that reduced patronage results in a reduction in spending on public transport infrastructure and a cut in services, or we'll actually see that people aren't willing to return to public transport once we see the majority of these virus concerns being reduced. I'm very scared of the idea that people will suddenly abandon public transport in favour of driving, and we'll see greater congestion and much more emphasis being put again into road projects and lots of construction of, expansive freeways like the horrible highways you see in Los Angeles. And I don't want that to happen to Brisbane. So I think it's important to sit back, think quite carefully about how public transport has performed through this, and consider, admittedly a little objectively, whether I think it's safe, what precautions I would take at the moment, and whether I am, comfortable travelling on public transport. So my first journey in nearly 7 weeks was on Monday. So it actually didn't start with public transport. So in context, I live in a suburban area of Brisbane, south of the CBD, and it's about a 9-kilometre walk into town. So I walked into town. First time I'd done it, I'd lived here 8 years, but I think it was really nice actually. I got to see some of the bikeway infrastructure and how it performs for pedestrians, and overall, it was quite a pleasant walk. It was a cool morning, which did help, so no sweat or anything gross like that. And I left home just after 7:15. I was in town about 8:40, which was fabulous. So whilst I was in town, I, grabbed a coffee, went for a bit of a walk around the city, sat in a grassy area and, waited for a little bit, and then whilst I was in town, I did catch a little bit of public transport and quickly had a socially distanced lunch with a friend of mine as she was finishing work early. So while I was out, I caught a combination of bus, train and ferry. Most of the buses were operated by Brisbane Transport. A couple were operated by Logan City Bus Service, obviously a standard Queensland Rail train, and a Transdevsil ferry. And I'm very pleased to say that by and large, I think that the majority of people are behaving responsibly on public transport and are spacing themselves out, which I think is really good, particularly off-peak. And at no point did I feel that it was unsafe or it was an uncomfortable situation, which is very reassuring given the sort of heightened guard that people are having at the moment about virus transmission and what that could mean for them. Overall, I found that the bus network was probably the best in terms of response to coronavirus. Compared to normal, I found that the vehicles were far cleaner, and people by and large behaved the most responsibly. And I found that just about everyone ended up spacing themselves out, whether that be subconsciously or consciously. I found that because those passenger numbers were quiet, people genuinely spaced themselves out and left at least 1.5 metres, which, to be fair, on a bus which only has 4 or 5 passengers is quite easy to do, but I found that people were generally quite responsible with how they did that.
When I was on the train, I'd say that
People generally were also responsible with how they distance. However, I don't think the same effort to clean these vehicles has been made. They certainly didn't have the same cleanliness that the buses did by and large. But people were behaving fairly responsibly. Unfortunately, I do find that in Brisbane, we do get a bit of antisocial behaviour on trains. I don't know if you watch mainstream news too much, but there was an interesting article of a guy who decided to bring a snake on board. But that's an isolated incident. But I would say overall, one thing that I do tend to see on trains a lot when I do travel by public transport is antisocial behaviour, like people who put their feet on the seats, people swinging around on handrails and stuff like that you just tend not to see on buses as much. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Then the other thing I caught, which was the CityCat. Now, overall, I think the CityCats have been cleaned really well. They, look tidy. However, I did find that it was just one passenger, and I think that's a completely isolated incident, decided to just sit right in front of me. However, I didn't feel that there was a higher risk or anything like that. It's just, compared to every other form of public transport, I think there was one or two passengers just on that service who didn't quite want to, spread out as much as everyone else, but I don't think that there was necessarily any more risk. I would say, though, if you're travelling in peak periods, definitely be mindful, and if you can, maybe choose a different way of getting home. It's worth it. If you've got multiple public transport options, that is, possibly spacing your times out if possible. I think flexible working arrangements are really helpful for minimising that contact, and I think post-virus, flexible working is probably here to stay. So overall, I think my experience on public transport was very positive at this point in time. I travelled off-peak. I found that overall people were practising social distancing and hygiene quite well. One thing I liked on the trains, actually, was that they've got little signs on the doors that say, push the door buttons with your elbow. So in Queensland, our trains still require you to push a button to manually open the doors. And I think that's quite good. It encourages people to minimise those contact surfaces a bit. One of the big things that I've noticed with buses is in Brisbane, or any Southeast Queensland bus I've seen, either Brisbane or Logan operated, they're encouraging rear door boarding only. They actually have a sign in the front door that says, do not board this at the front door unless you require assistance. And they've changed all the Go card readers around so that when you touch on at the back door, normally you get a fixed fee fare, which is more than your journey, but now it's synced up so that you pay the standard fare with the rear door boarding as well. Once again, thank you for joining me on Talking Planning. I've really appreciated all of your support at the moment. And through this difficult time, since graduating at the end of last year, seeing that bit of an economic downturn and everything sort of getting to the point we are now, it's been tough. So I've really appreciated the fact that people are actively engaging and listening, finding out more, and there's that little bit of support in this greater community, which I'm really appreciating at the moment. So once again, I'd like to say thank you for tuning in, watching this video. If this is your first time watching a video, go and check out some of my other videos. I've recently done one on my role as an autonomous vehicle chaperone. I've done one recently about regional aviation, and of course there was my introduction to the channel, which I'd encourage you, if you haven't had a look at those before, to go and check them out. And of course, if you like what you see and you want to continue seeing more planning videos and content, I highly encourage you to subscribe and click that notification bell so that you know when these videos are coming out, and so you can be one of the first to watch them and find out what I've been working on for the last few weeks. See you again soon, and now, as always, it is a more important time than ever to be talking planning. Everything depends on it.